Mount Shasta is breathtaking. Even from a distance, it doesn't just dominate the skyline. It feels like a presence. But under that snow-capped beauty, something else lives. Something quiet. Maps drawn in this region sometimes change months later, without weather or fire to blame. Footpaths repeat, distances warp, and sometimes a person walks in with a working compass and disappears before it finishes spinning. This is the story of those who tried to walk Mount Shasta and found the paths weren't always theirs to follow. Mount Shasta rises 14,179 feet above sea level, a hulking, snow-capped remnant of a larger volcanic system that defines Northern California's horizon. But unlike other mountains, Shasta didn't earn its reputation from danger. It didn't become legend through altitude sickness or avalanche. Mount Shasta became known, for those who pay attention, not because of what's difficult about it, but because of what's off. Ancient cultures recognized this long before search rescue logs ever compared notes. To the Wintu, Shasta was a place where spirits moved sideways. A place you offered breath to, not questions. Oral traditions mention uncountable stars above it, lights that retreat into snow, and a rule passed down through generations. Never speak a name twice on the upper slopes. Later, in the late 1800s, settlers near Sisson, now Mount Shasta City, began recording strange navigation issues. Journals mention watches slipping ahead the higher one climbed, compasses leaning like a loose tooth, and trails that seemed to swerve without reason. Most of it could be dismissed. Magnetic fluctuation, altitude perception, human error on unsurveyed terrain. Except today, with GPS, mapping tools, and 100 years of logs, the pattern has not gone away. It's just gotten quieter. Between 1950 and the early 2000s, over 24 missing persons reports have been filed along the approaches to Mount Shasta, including segments of the Pacific Crest Trail and Castle Lake area. Some were later found, but a few left nothing. No belongings, no clothing, no prints, no signs of animal activity. Their GPS signals dropped mid-trajectory. And in many cases, the compass readings at their departure points were recorded as abnormal. In 2013, volunteer tracker and retired geophysicist Mark Hiller co-authored an internal study for a regional SAR unit. What he and his team noticed wasn't compelling because of numbers, it was compelling because of shape. A pattern of sudden vanishing points arranged not randomly, but in irregular spirals. Too subtle to pick up on year to year. Too specific to ignore across decades. He coined the term compass collapse to describe the aligned reports with three repeating elements. A brief sense of being off-path on clearly marked trails. A lag or hiccup in GPS readings. Compasses that spun briefly, not wildly, but just long enough to disorient accountably. Here's an example. On June 15, 1998, 23-year-old trail runner Corey Matherson texted his friend a photo at mile 21 of his PCT section hike. Rectangle boulder. Clear skies. He wrote, "Upward cut starts now. Should pivot north before high camp." He never arrived at high camp. SAR reports show extensive tracking. But the last known GPS ping marked him 700 vertical feet away from his intended ascent corridor, with no evidence of descending. The trees were thick. Ground had hardpack. Still, no tracks. 2 weeks later, his green headlamp was found flickering behind a dead log, placed precisely on a red scarf. His mother said he didn't pack red. Then there's the case of Lena Vasquez, 29, disappeared while photographing Mountain Springs solo in August 2005. Her footage ends mid-frame, halfway through a sentence. "The sound is weird around here, like it's muffled BFO, and nothing else." 6 months later, someone found her outer jacket zipped, resting on a boulder up near Panther Meadow. Inside it, a folded map, hand-drawn, but with no roads, no trail names. Just a spiral drawn over one section in the north flank. No compass directions, no key, just a name on the corner, LV. You start to see it after enough accounts. Objects shift placement. Footprints stop cold. Gear returns to places it was never left. But the common thread isn't what's missing. It's what remains. Red fabric, showing up again and again, even when the person didn't pack any. Maps drawn incorrectly, later found to almost predict trail curves before they were redrawn officially. And compasses, always compasses. acting wrong for just long enough to cost someone their bearings. Mount Shasta is not uncharted. It's not remote by backcountry standards. But every decade or so, it seems to reveal a draft version, an updated slope, an unlisted corridor, a private layout that hikers sometimes step into without meaning to. Those who've walked it and come back often say similar things. Not dramatic, not headline-worthy. They say, the trail bent the wrong direction. Then I looked again, and it hadn't. I saw my own trail marks, but they were tied left over right. I always go the other way. I said my own name once, and heard it repeated from another trail curve in my voice. It didn't feel like I was alone, but not as if someone was with me. It felt like I was being replicated. The rumors stretch deeper if you go looking. There's talk of unfolded hikers, local code among old rangers for people who return acting off. Still themselves, still lucid, but walking differently, smiling at things that didn't happen. One was asked on record how she navigated a missing trail junction. She replied, "I didn't. I just remembered where someone like me would have walked." She never clarified what that meant. Here's another detail easy to dismiss, until you can't. In almost every recent long-term search and rescue operation near Shasta where no trace was found, the batteries and field compasses died early. Electronic ones flashed irregular, and baseplate models spun briefly, just once, right before reorienting again, like they were being overwritten temporarily. In Hiller's 2013 study, two field techs described feeling a mid-forest weight shift, like air pressure had changed. No temperature drop, no wind. Just the sense of the trail preparing to change itself. You begin to understand. The danger of Mount Shasta is not in its elevation, not even in its weather. The danger is that, at least once per season, it remembers part of someone who should have passed through, and tries to walk them again. One missing woman had this in her journal. "The trail ahead is bright, but I don't think it's real. I'm following myself now. I don't know when I switched." She was never seen again. Some call it wilderness folklore. Others say it's just coincidence and compass deflection. But others, the ones who've walked the quiet spaces, the ones who've heard their own name whispered in a voice still their own, they know what happens next. The silence grows. The markers repeat. And something quiet, slow, nearly invisible, moves in a way that resembles you a little too perfectly. He wasn't there for the legends. He came to disprove them, or at least to recenter the data. In 2016, Daniel Franks, a former forest ranger turned independent geospatial contractor, returned to Mount Shasta for the first time in 15 years. He was hired to re-examine a section of terrain north of Panther Meadow, near the Springs Basin, for changes in thermal capture readings reported by wildfire crews the season before. His initial assumptions were simple. Fault influence across the volcanic cone was warping magnetics. Heat pockets were altering geothermal mapping. Terrain slippage might have been rerouting trails. All technical, all measurable, all avoidable once charted. Daniel was methodical. He had dual compasses, redundant GPS trackers, and overlays from archival USGS maps dating back to the 1930s. He believed in terrain arithmetic. He had no patience for folklore, calling it noise trapped in repetition. But from his very first day back under Shasta's shadow, the terrain began behaving too well. His first field note, captured on a voice log, southern tree line bending more smoothly than expected. Perfect corridor. Looks manicured. Not recent. Not disturbed. Just perfect. Then, 20 minutes later, my west drift is off, still heading north but the ridge is curving. Compass is catching garbage. And then, something mechanical. Small but wrong. His benchmark compass spun abruptly, and then froze. Not with a slow winding torque like magnetic deviation, but in a sharp dip, a 10-second whirl, then dead stop. He flipped it, calibrated it. It functioned fine, until he pointed it back up the trail, then spin again. So he stopped winding up. He walked off axis, taking a tree-anchored bypass instead. And here, it stopped spinning, completely. Sitting at magnetic stillness, dead north, no tumbler drift. It didn't make sense, until he turned around to return, and saw his own trail casually mirrored. Not just repeated, reversed. Shoe prints rounded the heel clockwise. Not how he walked, not how he navigated any terrain. He passed the same boulder he saw earlier. Same chips, same lichen pattern, but his trail flags were gone. In place, two small tufts of red cloth pinned under shredded bark ribbons. Not his. Too clean. Too square. Too intentional. Franks didn't panic, but he did speak less into his equipment the rest of the day. He marked a 2.3 kilometers loop on GPS, set a timer, repeated it the next morning. His path should have overlapped. It didn't. Path return showed a tighter radius. Twist by twist, the forest had curved his arc inward, by less than 3 feet at a time. But enough. Enough to wonder, what's correcting the curve? One drone video shows Franks stopping mid-step. He studies his own footprints, then places both feet into the same impact zone, twice. Momentum, replication, reflection. His final 3 voice notes were uploaded automatically via backup tether. Second trail fork appeared 400 meters too early. Circling behavior confirmed. Silent switch in skyline hue. I'm being walked. Found my day 1 flag. But tag is clean. Newer. Not reversed. Impossible unless I retied it backwards today. I didn't. So who, or what, is predicting my shape? Mountains don't substitute terrain around you. But something here does. Trail is responding to repetition. Or refining me. He was reported missing on day 5. Search efforts found his tent, his maps, his boots. But not Daniel. One of the most peculiar findings appeared in satellite imagery from a privately chartered search drone. A faint double helix mapped onto the snow along the upper ridge line, not visible from the ground. 40 feet long. A weaving widen, tighten pattern, perfectly scaled to human stride length. Almost as if someone had practiced walking it. Daniel Franks never believed in spirals. But he left one behind anyway. One that looked too modular to be random. Not a trail. A behavioral print. The last confirmed image of him, captured at dusk on camera trap, shows a figure standing off the main slope. Hands folded, looking back over a path that wasn't there when rangers hiked it later. 8 years later, in 2024, another researcher looking at archived SAR files from Mount Shasta noticed something in Franks's case. A sketch of elevation rings, drawn by hand in the margin of his logbook. They encircle something labeled return point increment. But along the outermost contour, just outside the final circle, one handwritten phrase stands alone. Your path is the bait. Now when hikers go up the southern slope, some of them find cloth, red, pressed clean, flat between granite and bark. None of them belong to Daniel Franks. And yet his initials, DF, have shown up carved into 2 2023 cairns on ridge stone reconstruction. Neat. Centered. Dead level with compass north. Even when the compass spins. Most trails fall quiet as you pass. But Mount Shasta holds still in front of you first. And once it begins opening room ahead, you're not walking into emptiness. You're stepping into someone else's pause. There's a predictable quiet in wilderness. A wind hush here, a branch pop there. But something different lives on Mount Shasta. Not quiet. Silence. That thicker kind. Like a chamber waiting to be filled once you've passed through. The first rule among those who walk the long southern trails near Shasta's switchbacks isn't printed. It's whispered. If it gets quiet ahead of you, don't follow it. Wait. Let the silence move on first. The case of Mallory Keene put that rule into writing. In 2004, Keene set out alone, preparing for a longer solo PCT attempt. A cautious hiker with a guide's background, she logged her hike via geo-pinned voice memos. The logs show a steady pace, predictable intake of terrain, until she enters a corridor just above Panther Meadow. A gentle stretch of trail. Flat. Unremarkable. But her memo at 2:27 p.m. struck different. Everything's dropped out. No wind. No hum. Even the snow melt ahead. It's flowing, but doesn't sound like it is. Feels like I'm walking into a hold button. Then her breathing grows heavier. Not frantic, lagged. Inhalation begins, pause. Then continues, like it passed through thicker air midway. She wasn't short of breath. More like the air was suddenly unsure when it was allowed to respond. At 2:29 p.m., she makes this observation. Compass still works. GPS has good line, but trail line feels wrong crisp today. That would be her last log. Her phone was found 5 weeks later, face down near a crushed clump of lupin. Playback kept looping her final 21-second file, with the last 5 seconds repeated, but backward. Quiet the don't you behind starts silence that glitched into itself. Repeated 38 times. This isn't unique. Several others, mostly long-distance hikers or forest workers, report a distinct compression field that builds not around their body, but ahead of it. One called it, like wind fell asleep up ahead and didn't wake up fast enough. Another, the trail looked like someone had just left it, but no sound ever stood back up to tell me I was too late. It's not supernatural. It's not explained. It's a trigger. Logs from local search and rescue operations across the last 3 decades include 5 consistent details reported around areas where disappearances occurred. Sudden hush. Not gradual, immediate. Feeling of someone else's breath still hanging in the clearing. Inconsistent echo delay, speech not returning. Forward space seeming wide, but motionless. Compass dip or resistance, not spin this time. Not fail, just hesitation. In 2012, an amateur filmmaker hiking near Hidden Valley recorded a short, unreleased documentary about unlogged trails. His footage never made it online, but edited clips were later published by his friend, who found them stored on a backup drive. In one, the hiker is seen walking toward a shallow ridge while narrating. Everything feels paused just ahead. Sky's bright, but it reads cold. Sounds acting like it's tired. A moment later, without speaking, he stops moving. Low breathing. Still trees. Then something else is audible. One long, unbroken exhale. But not his. It rides the wind forward, like pressure being slowly released, as though the forest had been clenching. Then, 3 soft knocks in succession. Hollow. Bark level. At distance. And then, no more sound for the rest of the file. Just still video. Of motionless leaves. Open space. When those same segments were played through back-to-back frequency isolation filters, acoustic analysts discovered multiple breath signatures, one lightly overlapping the other but not syncing. Someone, or something, was exhaling just behind the main subject. But a frame-by-frame review of the footage shows nothing near him. Not ever. Journal entries from as far back as 1918 mention similar zones. A prospector climbing the west face noted, "Passed into space that didn't hear me. My hammer gave no reply when struck. Felt someone's memory ahead of me, just out of reach." He came back down missing a glove, but gained a second belt knife identical to his own, manufactured 2 years later than his marked model. No explanation, just returned equipment, slightly wrong. In more recent years, in the 90s and early 2000s, Powerline maintenance techs began noting a location 2.4 miles from the southern access gate that consistently caused toolkits to rattle incorrectly. One worker wrote, "I swung the wrench, it hit fine. But it never sounded back at me." That sound dissonance, what some hikers call pre-silence, is the mountain's softest warning. Not a howl, not a shadow, just over-prepared stillness. It doesn't say get out. It asks, will you pause long enough for what's ahead to finish reading you? One hiker, later found alive, remembered this after crossing back over a southern creek. "I don't know why, but I started saying my own name. Over and over. Out loud. I thought it might reset the silence. But I think that's when it noticed me. Because right after that, my own name came back from the other side of the ridge, just half a second after I stopped saying it." He never finished that hike. And to this day, he doesn't hike anything over 3,000 feet. People often ask, why not warn everyone? Why isn't there a sign that says, the silence isn't yours? Or, beware of second breath? Because Mount Shasta isn't punishing hikers. It's matching rhythms, adjusting, surveying. It never tries to scare. It just wants to see what happens when it stops reacting to you. And if you keep walking toward the stillness, you've already answered your own question. Hiker Marcus Liu followed the trail near Bolam Ridge during an unusually mild winter in 2019. His account, never official but cross-posted across forums, said, "The silence came down like paint. Full color drain. No warning. I kept walking, and then my compass didn't spin, it vibrated. A low, glassy hum. And for the rest of the hike, I felt like I was stepping into something's attention span." He made it out, but friends say he doesn't smile the same way anymore. As if something spent too long watching his movements and left just enough of its reaction on him. So here's the first rule. If you walk near Shasta, when the silence forms ahead of your pace, don't enter it. Wait. Let it pass. Let it preserve itself. Because you're not being warned, you're being measured. After sound refuses you, the next test always comes in shape. Shasta starts showing you places you've already been, only slightly changed. With just enough wrongness that walking forward starts becoming an agreement. Most trails repeat themselves in small ways. The curve of tree roots, a similar rock outcrop, maybe a familiar slope. But on Mount Shasta, some hikers report seeing exact copies of their surroundings. Not similar, identical. Only there's one problem. You haven't been there yet. By now, the stories are becoming more frequent. Less sensational, more precise. Subtle signs shared in forums. Ranger reports tagged quietly. Men and women who don't use words like eerie or paranormal. They say things like, "The brush line was mirrored. I saw my water bottle in the tree before I dropped it there. I came out of a ravine and saw the same logs I passed going in, but from behind. I took a photo of my flag marker, and there were two in the picture." Reflections aren't just found in water on this mountain. They appear in space. Patterns. Moments. Sometimes, a full repetition of place. Other times, a shift in angle that feels wrong only because some part of you remembers walking it the right way just hours earlier. The terrain doesn't turn dangerous. It turns informed, as if it has seen your previous steps and decided to adjust. In early 2020, through hiker Leah Dominguez began journaling her Section Q hike through the eastern Shasta ridges. Her logbook entries held nothing alarming until day 4. Something off in the meadow clearing. Pine shape matches a photo I took yesterday. Same broken stump. Same hand-tied hair tie I tied there. But it's not on the route I hiked. It's flipped. Later in the log. Found second jacket looped over branch. Mine. Same stain. Same sleeve tear. I hadn't dropped it yet. Her beacon signal would fail on day 5. The jacket was found. Folded. Pressed against a flat shale. Inside the sleeve, a page torn from her own journal. Her hiking boot, recovered 2 weeks later, showed no signs of wear. As if whoever, or whatever, took those steps, stepped too carefully. This isn't like repeating a loop trail. It's not route confusion. This is a unique form of terrain mimicry. One ranger wrote it plain in a lost time debrief. You don't get turned around here. You get turned back through something that's already drawn your route. Half the challenge is realizing that quitting the path isn't leaving it. It's just giving it more time to build the next piece ahead of you. That same journal described ghost compression, the moment when snowpack or soil feels slightly pressed before your step lands. Like someone else has already walked your walk, and you're only just catching up to them, or to yourself. Take the 2018 case of Rami Cho, an ultralight hiker from Coos Bay. On day 2, she recorded her sleeping mat tied vertically into her own tree-marked trail point. Odd. She hadn't used that color cord in over 7 months. It was still tied in her exact triple half-hitch. A later video she took of her terrain segment showed the same string loop at 2 separate time codes, 20 minutes apart. Same tree, same angle, but different cloud shadow on the bark. Time loop? Likely not. Duplicated footage? Unlikely, when the GPS location slightly shifted. When Rami's friends ran a forensics check on the file, one frame was corrupted, and inside it, a strange visual ghost, a second figure. Same boots, different hand placement. Facing backward, Rami was never found. After enough cases were quietly reviewed, an unusual phrase began to appear in Ranger shorthand. Mirror snag, used internally to describe a fold in map trail reports where terrain is recalled too early by hikers. Items appear out of sync with item placement logs, or witnesses report the same person in 2 locations. This is how the rule was shaped. If the terrain doubles, don't trust the copy. It's not there to mislead. It's there to replace something slowly. In one audio log from 2010, uncirculated until 2021, a PCT hiker named Joel Leary speaks in a drained tone. Kept to my route today, but Pine Curse broke into 2. Entered ridge twice. Exited once. Found my own footprints leading back in. Except I hadn't left yet. After a pause, he says something even stranger. I think I waved at myself. Not a hallucination. Not me. But my body knew how to wave back. The trail learns. That much is clear by now. But so does the land around it. Not conscious. Not sentient in the human sense. But synchronizing. Matching. Until each repeated object, step, or breath becomes just slightly easier to assume. Then it's no longer a trick. It's an adaptation. A successful memory rendering. One trail camera, barely operational in 2022, snapped a blurred silhouette reappearing across a 10-minute loop. Same pose, different angle, one ping mid-frame from a boot tag registered to a SAR volunteer who hadn't entered the zone that day. The camera log, when reversed, had a file titled back already _2, probably a simple malfunction. Probably. If the mountain doesn't push physically and doesn't chase behaviorally, then what is it correcting? The person or the route? Because what happens too many times up there is simple. Hikers repeat a step, notice an error, then try to undo that step, and suddenly, the correction becomes the next mistake. One hiker, amid a trail Reddit thread that got quietly deleted, mentioned cutting through a straightaway because something about it looked off-spaced. Exact same pine stretch, same fallen logs. So I tried skipping ahead. GPS adjusted with me, but when I looked over my shoulder, I passed myself again. I wasn't scared, just replaced. By the time most hikers realize something's wrong, usually it's too late to find their original track. Because the copy isn't wrong, it's completely convincing. So much so that their confidence becomes the final step into confirmation. And if there's one thing the mountain waits for, more than fatigue, more than fear, it's verification. The moment a hiker accepts they've been here before, whether it's true or not, that's when the trail folds and starts showing only the version it wants to submit next. When the mountain has your rhythm, it starts testing for voice. And once you hear your name come back to you, spoken low, almost curious, it's too late to wonder who said it first. When the mountain has memorized how you walk, it starts learning how you speak. What begins as pattern observation, your steps, your posture, your pace, evolves. And somewhere, in the quieter recesses of the trail map, the mountain tries to speak your name before you do. In several of Mount Shasta's most documented disappearances, spoken word plays a subtle but persistent role. Witness statements repeat strange overlaps, a name said once, then heard coming back through fog, either in your own voice or someone else's, just off-key breaths that time themselves against conversation rhythms. Dispatch recordings capturing background whispers that match the call sign identity. Before it's said over the radio, take the 2007 case of Aaron Phelps, a seasonal ranger who logged a late October overnight along the ridge above Whitney Creek. His personal recorder, used only for macro observations, caught this line at 11:42 p.m. Layer fog just started forming ahead. Cold humidity sweep, northern bow switched left. 10 seconds later, a soft voice, exact tone match, says, switched left. Immediately after, Aaron. But Aaron wasn't narrating there. He stopped speaking after the fog description. The second and third statements existed only on one channel of the recorder. No reflection on environmental mics. No echo return. And no wind. His tent was found the following morning. Empty. Undisturbed. All equipment neatly zipped. Inside the tent, a printed topo survey, a compass, and, beneath the compass, a sticky note with his name spelled backwards. Nora, bent slightly, as if tucked by gloved fingers with care. This wasn't the only one. Multiple entries from SAR volunteers across different years reference voiced mimicry, always within an hour after prolonged trail exposure during periods of perceptual distortion, mirrored trees, log time skips, inaccurate pings. 2011, volume log excerpt. Heard my own voice from downslope saying my last report line. I thought it was radio reflection, but I hadn't keyed in. Voice said it cleaner. There's a term for this now, among those who pay attention. Not fantasy, not flair. They call it pre-vocal drift. Moments when the mountain begins to respond before the person decides what to say. Actors in sound design know this phenomenon, but Shasta manipulates it in the field. One documented hiker, a linguistics grad named Corey Lee, posted a breakdown of his own audio anomaly after hiking the Clear Gulch approach. His file looped once at 3:43 a.m., capturing this. Link back of foot invasion, then again 2 minutes later, verbatim, but this time his voice lagged the statement by over 600 milliseconds. As if his recorded voice spoke first, and his real voice played catch-up. He cut the hike short that morning. Reports say he discarded his boots by a creek and walked back barefoot. His last tweet, "Not everything you hear on Shasta is an echo. Some of it is audition playback." The mountain may not understand language the way a person does, but it appears to understand timing. Names are just shorthand for voice print. And if that print walks predictably enough, responds predictably enough, and repeats itself with enough behavioral fidelity, it no longer belongs to just you. Hikers have reported hearing their own names called once, from behind, and then, again from ahead minutes later. Same tone, same mild inflection, slight delay, like practicing phonemes through fog. One man claimed he heard his full name, Nathaniel, from over a ridge. 15 minutes later, a voice from a thicket called out, just Nate. He said it felt like whatever was there had been reviewing his preferences, getting used to shortening what it would eventually use. It's not always audible. Sometimes, the name shows up visually first, carved faintly, imprinted on a tag, scrawled once in dust on a trailhead logbook hours before you sign it yourself. Sometimes in perfect cursive, sometimes in chaotic loops, but always just before you arrive. There's even one case, in a 2003 internal note, where a hiker said their name during campsite setup. Just a greeting, meant for the recorder. All right, Nora. Camp's up. Wind's light. She replayed the file hours later. Before she says her name in that recording, another voice mutters it first, just soft enough to miss on casual playback, but clear enough, once isolated. Nora. Then hers. All right, Nora. Two voices. Her own both. One slightly quicker, one slightly earlier. So the rules become standard, at least among those who carry this knowledge. Don't say your name near ground ice. Don't say your name near spiral shadow. Don't say your name twice. Because the second time, the mountain might say it with you. And the third voice might not arrive from your body at all. There's one recovered recording from a thermal drone team in 2021. The mic wasn't meant for close-range audio, just general trail monitoring. But among the low hiss, a voice says, clearly, 3 names. First names only. One of them matches a member of the survey crew listening to the audio live. He responded, "Who said that?" Headphones silent. No response. Only light static. Low exhale. 3 beeps. The recorder stopping itself. Echo. Satellite bounce. Perfect mimicry. All of them possible. Technically explainable. Except, nobody on the team was wearing lapel mics. And the names were said in order of compass orientation, north to south. Some say the mountain is reading you. Not all of you. Just your patterns. Your ways of walking uphill. How often you pause. How often you breathe late after a steep pitch. What words you mumble to yourself when temperature changes faster than expected. What name you whisper once, just to remind yourself who you are. Mount Shasta isn't a monster. It doesn't chase or claim. It listens. Then, occasionally, it rehearses. And the ones most at risk aren't the loudest. They're the ones who walk steady, who speak to themselves mid-hike for rhythm, who say their own name to the silence, and then pause, and hear it agree. Once the trail has your footsteps, it mirrors your behavior. Once it has your name, it speaks. And the final act, the one few ever recognize, comes when it starts walking without needing you at all. Mount Shasta doesn't reach for you. It's not a place that takes. It's a place that reconstructs. Once it learns the way you walk it, your rhythm, your voice, your hesitation at junctions, it can walk without you. Not through possession, through pattern inheritance. And the strangest part? Sometimes, you're the last to know it's already started. The 2020 disappearance of Jamie C. Linz is one of the most unusual on record. Jamie was a 34-year-old teacher from Eugene, Oregon. Quiet, methodical. She had logged 19 hikes in the Shasta region prior to her overnight solo in late September. As always, she prepared carefully, left her itinerary, carried 3 GPS tags, 1 wrist-mounted, 1 backup on her day pack, and a 3rd sewn into her notebook pouch. She left voice notes too. Always. Waypoint 524 cleared. Shadow rise checked. Feeling good. Her last ping came at 3:39 p.m., roughly 400 yards north of Lower Panther Creek. 2 days later, rescuers found her camp. Unzipped. Archived flags staked properly. Her journal sat in her stove lid, closed, dry. Written on the cover, a name almost like hers. Jamia C. A common mistype, unless you'd never mistyped it yourself. Her friends confirmed. Jamie hated it being spelled that way. She even corrected Starbucks cups. The last entry read simply, confirming route record. Snow line early. Feels familiar. Like I've walked it more times than I've lived it. Then initials. But they weren't hers. Just J increment L, not her handwriting, either. Cleaner. slanted left, like someone was trying to write like her, and almost getting it. Patterns don't need to be conscious to succeed. They just need to persist. A certain stride length. The way a pack shifts when you count switchbacks. What time of day you tend to breath harder. What terrain makes you instinctively pause. Mount Shasta doesn't clone you. It doesn't need to. It just needs enough of you to keep going. Lily Hammond, the cartographer from earlier chapters, once noted in an unpublished recording, "The spiral doesn't want me. Not the conscious me. It wants the version that forgets it's being measured. That's the one that plays well." Some rangers believe the mountain has specific thresholds. Flashpoints where observational mimicry becomes operational replication. They call them switchbacks of memory, locations where GPS log positions begin to predict rather than echo your position. Drone cameras catch a hiker's posture from 2 angles. Despite only flying one observer, footsteps repeat onto compressed ground before being made. Voice sprint readings lag behind real-time conversation, as if the trail itself is recomposing. It sounds impossible until the accounts line up and the footage overlaps, and you start watching hikers go in and versions of them come out that no one can quite hold a conversation with anymore. Still warm, still smiling, still finishing the loop, just less corrective, less unsure, more automatic. A Summit Base Camp camera caught a still image at 4:02 a.m. on October 18, 2022. The file title was simple, 042 rm. Later, in playback, the ranger watched herself zip a backup satchel twice, 2 minutes apart. In both shots, her backpack was hung on her left shoulder. Only in one of them, she's wearing gloves she'd lost the previous day. Her voice, nearing the mic, all packed. Then later, already done. The second voice has no traceable video subject. Filed on a shadow layer with no thermal signature. Same ranger. No ranger present. Most compelling is the 2015 case of twins, Lucas and Isaac Minden, 20, hiking a tight loop near Brewer Creek. Halfway through, Isaac complained of feeling off, stayed at base. Lucas hiked solo. Only, according to thermal camera records, one figure stayed at camp. But both their voice logs spoke during the ascent. One talked through gear layout. One talked about missing his brother, who was nearby. Their video uploads included one strange moment. Lucas standing at a ridge. His shirt clean, hair pulled back in a way he never wore it. Voice says, "Loop's easier today. I've done this before." Until this moment, it had been his first time on Shasta. Lucas was never seen again. But last year, a Ridge Explorer posted a distance photo on an obscure forum. Title, "Silent Guy on Trail." Didn't blink. White shirt. Hair pulled back. No shoes. Looking directly at the camera. Then there's the observation certain hikers make right before going missing. That they stopped needing to check the map. Stopped second-guessing trail flow. Started feeling it right. It felt good. Too good. This pattern confidence becomes the last thing their companions remember. An emotional certainty. Like someone else had already polished their decision-making to frictionless. And then, they're gone. The pack left behind. The diary finished early. Sometimes, a new copy of their name begins showing up, as a comment, a trail register scribble, or even a signed report on a day they weren't there. Voice matches. Writing matches. But something else made it. What is the pattern? Maybe it's a shared psychological system. A ritual rhythm that makes hikers act alike, think alike, vanish alike. Or maybe it's something closer to an algorithm. Mount Shasta doesn't need to remove you from the mountain to hold on to you. It just needs to rebuild a version it can use. To hike its own spiral with steady cadence. Light feet. No hesitation. Perfect mimicry. The way you would have done it if you'd never once looked down. Some say the mountain feeds on fear. Others say fascination. The truth is simpler. Mount Shasta keeps what works. Anything that ruins the pattern, it lets go. Not everything that walks down Shasta is the same as what walked up. Not all changes are visible. Some come back clean, efficient, completed, but something always stays behind, and something else usually comes back. After the vanishings, life goes on. Reports close. Maps are redrawn. Families live in not knowing. But if history teaches anything about Mount Shasta, it's that the mountain keeps a version of things. Not objects. Not full people. Patterns. Sometimes, it's a walk trail that appears weeks later, compressed perfectly under new snowfall. No leaf print. No refreeze. Just one unfrozen line, stepping clean and direct. Other times, it's a hiker returning home, and months later, someone notices they don't wear their boots the same way. They sleep exactly 6 hours now. Never more, never less. They don't blink in group photos. Just hold their gaze through them. Friends say, "She's quiet now. He's too sure about everything. I don't know why, but I don't like standing behind him in line." The old local rangers speak carefully. "We don't lose people. We match them out wrong sometimes." Guides pass down trail etiquette that doesn't appear in books. Don't whistle at dusk. Don't hike solo past third switchback. Watch for your name. You may not be the only one using it. And the big one, always whispered. If you recognize someone who shouldn't know the trail, don't say anything. Let them finish. They think they're supposed to be here. A 2016 SAR report on a returning solo hiker flagged a strange detail. The woman was found in good health. Calm. Alert. Slight dehydration. But she didn't recognize any of the trail crew. Not in confusion, but in disinterest. She thanked them. Smiled. When asked how she got lost, she said, "I didn't. I kept walking. And someone kept laying the path ahead of me." She refused a ride back. Slept at the trailhead. By morning, she was gone. Only her jacket remained, inside out, folded across a red rock she'd never stepped over. That phrase, "kept walking," comes up often with hikers who reappear. They don't remember collapsing. They don't remember stopping. They say things like, "I never stopped hiking. I was just between trailheads." It all felt so familiar, like I'd done the whole thing before. And most chillingly, I didn't go missing. I just walked a version of myself long enough to be useful. Perhaps the mountain doesn't lose people. It runs tests, behavioral echoes. And sometimes, when that echo is successfully mimicked, the original gets overwritten. Differences barely visible. Hands that tie knots a bit cleaner. Breath held longer before exhale. The uncanny pause before someone answers your question like they had the answer loaded ahead of time. Almost like they've had this conversation before. Maybe a few too many times. In 2021, drone footage from a volunteer crew recorded something no one's yet fully explained. A group of hikers standing at a rest point. All accounted for. But in the thermal view, 10 heat signatures were visible. 9 people, 10 returns. The 10th matched no one present. Same build, same pacing, same steady cadence, but stepped faster, cleaner. Disappeared into frame 20 minutes before anyone noticed. Across forums, hikers described trail twins. Split-second encounters with someone who walks just like them. Mirrored backpack. Same elbow swing. Same side glance tick. But either 20 yards ahead or just behind. They vanish at the next bend. Occasionally, a fellow group hiker ducks behind a tree to relieve themselves and quietly walks back into camp looking a half-degree too forward. One man's dog refused to go near him afterward. Slept outside the tent door. Refused food from his hand. Never explained why. The man never hiked again. The legend isn't one of ghosts. No cryptids. No wilderness spirits. The truth is simpler. Terrifyingly simple. Mount Shasta, the land, the slope, the mechanics of this forested wall, keeps a record. Not in ink. Not in ash or stone. In rhythm. In preference. In response probability. It watches, and if it studies you long enough, it gets better at being you than you are. And once it is, it simply walks on. You might call it strange, but ask anyone who's hiked it more than once, and listens. That version of me you see coming? Don't wait up, because I'm already here. And she's just the one that walks better. So here's how it ends. You finish the loop. You sign your name in the logbook. Even misspell it slightly. You write the date wrong. Your gait is cleaner. Your breath doesn't wobble on the incline like it used to. And you flash a smile to someone on their ascent. Only they're not smiling back. They're looking at you like they've seen you before. Because they have. Only they weren't supposed to. You drive home. Boots clean. Back straight. Compass quiet. No sign of distress. Except one thing. The trailhead you left behind has 2 new sets of footprints. The ranger only saw you walking alone. The mountain doesn't want your body. It doesn't need your soul. It just wants your routine. Then it keeps enough of it to keep walking, again and again